My solid-state drive boots so fast that I miss the boot menu. Now you'll find that this is a meme making fun of some first world problems, but in the long run it's fairly true. Adding a solid-state drive to a computer can dramatically increase the performance of that computer. It can also work quieter and use a lot less power. This is all because a solid-state drive does not have any internal moving parts. Therefore, it doesn't need the power that a typical hard drive would need in order to find the information that is on the drive itself. I believe that as we are upgrading our systems here at the magazine, that we should really consider purchasing some solid-state drives for several of the more process-intensive computers here in order to help save us on time, labor, and even power by the time that we're done. So you're probably wondering, what is a solid-state drive? Well, a solid-state drive is fairly similar to a hard drive in that it stores data. Typically, it keeps your operating system and some of the other applications that you're going to be using on a regular basis. It has a few similarities, such as it stores data without using any power. If it didn't store data without power, then you would really have to find some other way to keep the majority of your data. So this is one of the things that it had to have in order to be better, or even as good as, your regular hard drives. Second, it uses semiconductors as a means of storing and retrieving digital information. These semiconductors are similar to like a flash drive. You just plug it into your computer and you plug it out when you don't need it. And there you go. There is no extra moving about. And that brings us to the next part. It has no moving parts. It does not create as much noise, and it doesn't need the power that a hard drive needs in order to move these parts around and to take that actuator arm across the disk in order to find what you need to find on that drive. And it's simply just, it helps speed up the process simply because of not having any moving parts. Okay, so great. We've got new solid-state drives that work harder, work faster, and work better than the old hard drives. So what exactly is the difference? Well, let's really begin with how they're the same. First, they both store data without using any kind of power. If a hard drive is turned off, it'll save your data. If a solid-state drive is turned off, it will also save your data. However, a hard drive uses rapidly rotating disks that are coated with a magnetic material. This is in joint with an actuator arm that moves across the disk in order to find the data that is stored randomly onto the disk. This actuator arm will move around and save the data wherever it can find space on this disk to save the data. And then it'll have to do the same thing in order to find the data that's on the disk and pull it up to where you can see it and know what you're doing. This causes a latency between the disk and the monitor, which can drastically slow down your computer and cause it to just run a lot slower than it would if it didn't have these moving parts like the solid-state drive does. So you're sitting there thinking, can a solid-state drive really make that much difference because there are no moving parts within the drive? Yes. Yes, it can. And to prove it, let's take a look at some of the test results that Toshiba found when they ran some tests on some of their old hard drives versus some of their new solid-state drives. So when Toshiba did these tests, they started out on some of the things that a computer does most. Your boot up, your restart, and launching Photoshop. Photoshop is a program that takes a lot of time to load up, and it's just a big load on your computer. So on the boot up, the hard drive took 40 seconds, which is usually really good, except the solid-state drive did it in half the time of 20. On the restart, from shutting it down to bringing it back up, the hard drive took 38 seconds, almost as long as it took to boot up to begin with, whereas the solid-state drive took 25 seconds. This is a lot faster. And where the solid-state drive really shines is in launching Photoshop. Photoshop can take a lot of resources and can really take some time to boot up sometimes. And for the hard drive, it took 15 seconds, but the solid-state drive did it in a third of the time at 5 seconds. Now, I did mention that there would be some random read latency differences, and when I saw the numbers, I was amazed. The 5400 RPM hard drive came in at 9 milliseconds random read latency. The 7200 RPM hard drive had a 7 millisecond random read latency, but the solid state drive, in order to find that information that they wanted real fast, barely even took 1 millisecond. This is an amazing amount of time that it will take and save for the people that are using these computers, and in the long run save power and everything else. I also mentioned that the solid state drive would not use nearly as much power as the hard drive. And when Toshiba ran their tests, this is what they found. The desktop hard drive, while idle, would use 4 watts of power, and while loading and doing something, it would use 6.5 watts. Whereas the solid state drive wouldn't use a single watt of power while just sitting idle. And while on a load, it didn't even pull in at 2. It pulled around 1.5 to 1.7 watts of power. This may not seem like a whole lot on a single computer, but here, where we have dozens of computers running at one time, saving just small watts of power over a long time will cause the power bill to go down, and it'll be much cheaper to keep the place running. So there you have it. Installing a solid state drive can help save the money over the long run. The initial cost of these drives may be a little bit more than your older hard drives. However, due to the lower cost of labor, because the people that are using these solid state drives will not have to wait nearly as long for their computer to do their processes, they will also be using less power, all because these drives do not have any working parts. And you'll find that the initial purchase is going to be slightly more for the solid state drives over the hard drives, but in the long run you'll find that the money will go down, and you'll end up saving far more money with these solid state drives in the long run than you would with hard drives.